Hi guys, in this video I want to share some results with you from a test study I've been doing over the last 9 or 10 months. So I started the site in March and now we are in January. So the site is 10 months old and it's a very super broad site that's just about anything and everything. It's a women's magazine and I've been writing about cultural questions, personal development, relationship, fashion, social media, interior design, jewelry, shopping, furniture, dating tips, and just all over the place. So the idea was to test if you can write about like everything and all there is to write about instead of going with a specific niche. I wanted to test if I could rank this site, if I could get good traffic to a site like that. And you might be wondering why on earth would you do that, but we'll get back to that in a second, because there are some major advantages to having like a broad domain name and a broad site altogether. So I started this site with a very broad domain name and a very broad idea about that I wanted to go into everything. Think about something like Mashable, for example. They write about everything from tech and lifestyle and fashion and just all over the place. And I posted 37 articles on the site and I made sure that they were in different categories, so there was no really topical relevance, or you can say no silos or categories, meaning that Google would not really see me as an expert in anything from the start at least. So that was the idea, to see if a site like that would ever take off. So as I said, I posted 37 articles and then I just let them sit there because I didn't want to waste more time and money on the project if it didn't take off at all. So before we look at the numbers and we see what happened with this site, I want to talk a little bit about why you may want to go for a broader niche or a broader domain name rather than a very small and well-defined niche. So there are definitely more growth potential down the line for your site if you go with a very broad domain name and a broader niche altogether, because you'll be able to go in many different directions if your site is not called Soundbar Freak or Best Soundbar Review, something where you go more specific and you talk about a specific product or a category of items or products or a hobby or something like that. So by going broader, so to speak, with the domain name and going for a bigger niche, there are this growth potential, of course, but there's also potential to get more authority over time, because let's say you wanted to build this one bigger site instead of building 2 or 3 smaller sites. Then over time, if you put more articles on one website instead of spreading them over different sub-niches, you would have more links pointing to this same domain name. So let's say you build this bigger, broader site instead of building out 2 or 3 smaller sites in smaller, well-defined niches. Then over time, let's say you post 100 articles on this site and you post 100 articles across these 3 sites. So 100 articles is the amount of content you can produce, right? And over here you have them put in 3 different sites. Let's say these 100 articles will attract 30 links over time. Then when you have all these articles on the same domain name and you create a broader site, all these links will point to the same domain name, while over here they'll be pointing to 3 different domain names, meaning that you'll sort of spread that authority in Google's eyes over several sites. Over here, on the other hand, you'll have a bigger, more authoritative and more trustworthy site in Google's eyes, because the domain has more backlinks altogether across the articles on the site. And something else that's really cool if you have a site that's broader rather than narrow is that whenever you find a really good writer, you'll be able to work with that writer to figure out what they're good at, what they know about naturally, like what experience do they have. So by having a broader niche or a broader site, a broader domain name, you'll be able to work with your writer and figure out what they are good at, what they are passionate about, so you'll get better content, because you don't need to force them to only write about sound bars or a specific type of bikes or birds or something like that. So now let's dive into the data here and see what actually happened on the site. So this is Google Search Console, and you'll see here that it took a long time before anything happened on the site, and then slowly it started to take off. And then here we had the Google Core update, which did to my site what it normally does. It will cause a dip for a while and then it bounces back over a week or 2. And then the growth here continues. And then of course we have Christmas here, and we have a lot of things going on here over the holidays, and that just means that traffic will probably pick up again here in January. And the holiday season here is definitely something to factor in, because if we look here at the demographics over in Google Analytics, we will see here that the majority, the blue portion here, is traffic from the United States. And if we include the UK, Canada, and Australia, it's 75% of the traffic. So it's definitely from the Western English-speaking world, which also means that Christmas is a big thing, and we will have less traffic when it's something that hasn't gotten anything to do with Christmas, or just something that people will Google around the holidays. So if we go back here, we can see that from these 37 articles, we got around a little less than 13,000 clicks. And out of these 37 articles, 30 of those by now had 8 to 9 months time to rank. That means that normally these articles would have reached their full potential in terms of traffic. And normally I get around 800 to 1,000 page views per article. And that's not what I'm getting here, as we'll see in a second over in Google Analytics. So remember, we're testing how important it is to have this topical relevance, to write articles around the same sub-niche. And we're also seeing if we can beat this without trying to rank on similar topics if we just go for underserved topics. Because on this site here, all 37 articles are very, very much underserved topics. It's definitely something where you would find forums, Quora, and other user-generated content at the top of Google. So let's get over here to Google Analytics and see what happened here. So you'll see over the last 30 days, only one of these articles has more than 800 page views per month. It's at 1,400 page views, so that's doing pretty well. But then the rest of those here are much lower. And as we keep scrolling down here, you'll see many of these articles have like less than 50 clicks by now. And they're definitely underserved topics, and they're definitely not in the YMYL space. So I strongly believe that we will rank for it eventually. It just takes a lot longer. So by looking at the numbers here, with around 3,000 page views over a 30-day period, normally I would get closer to 30,000 page views, because I have 30 articles that had time to rank. They are more than 8 months old. They would each draw in around 800 page views, and then some extra for the other articles that haven't reached their full potential yet. So I think that would be around 25 to 30,000 page views. So the site here is growing around 8 to 10 times slower than my other sites, where I don't stretch myself over a lot of different topics, but I try to stick to a specific category of topics. So I sort of develop this topical relevance in Google and show them that I'm actually an authority on what I'm writing about. So I think it's really important to test these assumptions once in a while, because Google is evolving and we need to know what happens. So of course I assumed this would be the case, but I didn't know that it was up to 10 times slower if you don't follow the strategy of writing articles around the same category or the same product or something like that. But again, you can definitely rank your site. It just takes a lot longer. So you might be wondering, what about monetization for a site like this? And for this specific site here, I didn't turn on ads just yet, because there's not a lot of traffic to it yet, as you could see. And I also didn't include any affiliate links. It was just a test, so far at least, to see if I could actually get some traction and get some traffic to the site. And then of course we can always monetize it if it's a good success. But I would say for a site like this that's super broad, it's a great opportunity to monetize it really well, because you'll be able to dig into products and areas with a lot of commercial intent, and you can just go all over the place. So as soon as you find a topic or a subcategory of topics where you have good earnings with ads and affiliate, you can just keep digging into that area, and you can find other sub niches within that broad domain name that can go on the site, because you'll be able to go almost everywhere with a site like this. So I would say it's a really, really strong strategy for the monetization part of things. So let's try to conclude something here, if this is a good strategy to go as broad as this, or if this is indeed too broad. I would not build a site like this, not as broad as this. I would not go all over the place. I would try to have a defined niche, at least in the beginning. I would try to write articles around the same type of product or the same hobby or whatever, and not spread yourself all over the place, because you will just have a harder time getting started with the site if you really need a year or two before you see any real traffic to it. So it's very, very demotivating not to be able to monetize your site even after a year and not really make hardly any money with it. But we saw that it can be done, and to me it looks like it just takes a lot more time. So you'll probably see the same amount of traffic. It'll just be delayed maybe even a year more. But I'll definitely come back with an update on the site and the traffic and how it all goes eventually after a couple more months. And if something starts to happen quickly, of course, I'll let you guys know. So I think the conclusion here is you can totally do it if you want a site like that, and I think it's a strong strategy if you have time on your hands. So maybe for your second or third or fourth site, if you are deciding to build this as a business and you're not just looking to build like one blog and maybe create this blog of yours around a hobby that you're really passionate about. If you're more looking to create a business and you want to diversify and go into different areas and have different sites and a portfolio of sites, I think it can be a great strategy. But just be aware that the traffic will come much, much slower. So I think with a site like this, what I would do differently is to always start with, let's say, 20, 30 or 40 articles around the same product or hobby or sub niche within that site. Because even though the domain name is super, super broad, it doesn't mean that you have to start going all over the place with the first 50 articles, right? You can still start writing the first batch of articles around the same topic, and then you will definitely take off much, much faster because you'll have this topical relevance in Google and they will see you as an expert much, much sooner around this specific thing that you decide to write about, or this sub niche that you decide to start out with on your site. And then down the line you'll be able to just go everywhere with the site, and that's why I like to really use these broader domain names. So I'm testing out a lot of things, but I'm also trying to build out these big pillar sites that can go really, really far. So the deciding factor here when you're choosing a niche where you can go broad is really the domain name. So a good example here I just came up with, instead of calling your site Pro Hiker, if you want to build a site about hiking, you could call it Nature Freak, for example, because then you'll be able to not only talk about hiking eventually, you'll also be able to talk about swimming or biking, running, camping, and just all of it, really. And that's a great way to do it because a site called Nature Freak will just look as valid to write about hiking as a site that specifically has the word hiking in the domain name. So I always try to avoid having a product name or a category name or something like that in the domain name. I don't want to have a site that's called Pro Hiker because that will limit me to only be able to write about hiking. And if for some reason I'm not able to rank there over time, or maybe I even exhaust the number of topics and there's just really no more really good topics to write about eventually, then I'll get stuck with the site and I can't really continue developing it. And maybe at that stage the site has gathered, let's say, 200 really, really strong links or thousands of links. And by that time, it'll be a monster of a site that you really want to throw some really competitive stuff on, where you can make a lot of money from affiliate heavy articles. And it'll be such a pity if you're not able to keep growing it into other verticals, if by then you have a really, really strong site with a lot of authority in Google. Subscribe to my channel and give this video a thumbs up. I hope it was helpful. I'll see you guys again soon. Bye.